Hello, dear student. I welcome you again to this lesson as we continue with social studies in Standard 8. Remember, in Standard 8, just as we said, there are a number of topics. And one of it is the partition of Africa. And this one is unit number 4. Previously, we were looking at unit number 3, where we looked at slave trade in West Africa. In that unit, we looked at how slave trade was done. We looked at the triangle trade. We looked at the abolition of slave trade. We looked at the effects of slave trade. What was the effect? What were the effects of slave trade? So I guess you are following even that lesson. But today, we are on unit number 4, and the unit is Partition of Africa. Partition of Africa. Now, on this part, we are looking at the units. Let's first look at the units, or the units in this section. The first one, as we can see here, we did the first one: solar system, the shape and movement of the earth, West African slave trade, and the partition of Africa is today's unit that we are going to look at. So here is the work, the whole work that you need to know in Standard 8 if you are to pass social studies. So these are the topics. So make sure that as you study, these are the things. And the good part of it is that all these things, they are there on video. They are the video lessons already there. So you can just choose today, right? And let me go to unit number 24, pollution. Then you just play the video, study that one. With what you study in school, you find that you are getting. So we are doing this only for you, so that you are not left out. When you miss something in class, come and play any video on the related topics that you want. And you miss something here, go meet the teacher, and who is going to explain to you further. So I don't want anyone to be left behind. We want you to pass, and pass with flying colors. So let's be together in this one as we look at the unit number 4. This is Partition of Africa. Partition of Africa. Now, on Partition of Africa, we have to know that Africa did not have countries as we know them today. It was made up of kingdoms and empires. So today we have countries: Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and all countries that are there in Africa. For you to go to Mozambique, you need a passport. For you to go to Tanzania, a passport, something like that. But what you have to know is that before there was Tanzania, there was Malawi, there was Zambia, there were no such countries. There were no boundaries, there were no borders as we know them today. They were just kingdoms. Kingdoms were just in specific areas. In specific areas. When you go, you have known, or you have read about the kingdoms. Mwenemtapa Kingdom. That Mwenemtapa Kingdom did not occupy the whole of that Zimbabwe as we know it today. It was just in a certain section. So we have to know that one. So in the late 19th century and early 20th century, Africa was partitioned. So to be partitioned, you have to know that it is to be divided. To be divided. So it was divided by European nations. So you have to know this thing, that Africa was only divided by the European nations. It was partitioned or divided. So the boundaries that we know today, we are not responsible for those boundaries. They were done by the Europeans. They are the ones who made the boundaries, that Malawi should be like this, Zambia should be like this, Mozambique like this. We were not responsible for that. So partition was not peaceful as Europeans, they scrambled for land. So we have also to know that this partition or division of Africa, it was not that maybe Portugal and France, they come and say, okay, let us move the demarcations here, here and there. No, it wasn't like that. It was not like that. It was like a hot cake. Like people are hungry, so everyone wants to eat from the small food that is in there. So everyone could pick whatever wanted. So there was what was called a scramble. So they could scramble for land. They could scramble for land. So that is why partition of Africa is sometimes referred to as the scramble for Africa. Here we are saying that partition of Africa, another name for partition of Africa is a scramble for Africa. The making of those borders or boundaries, they were not like all the European countries sat down and they were moving. They were moving together to say, this is yours, this is mine. No, they were scrambling. I take this, I take this, I take this, I take that, I take this, like that. That they were scrambling for Africa. So that's why you find that even the boundaries, they are not straight. They go this side, they go this side, they go this side, like that. If you check United States of Africa, America, that is the maps, you find that the states in there, they are not as zigzag as our countries in Africa. No, they are just straight. So right, the state of Minnesota, straight like a rectangle. The state of what? Because those states were divided peacefully. But the states or the countries of Africa, there was a scramble. I take this one. So when you scramble, you don't mind whatever you have left or whatever you have grabbed, provided you have taken something. So that's why it was just a matter of taking. I take this now. I take this. I take that, without making straight boundaries like that. So that was it. Now let us look at the causes. What were the causes of the scramble or partition of Africa? Number one is the need for raw materials for industries. During this period, we have talked of the 19th and the 20th century. The 19th century means the 1800s. The 20th century, the 1900, the 1800 and the 1900. So during those years, that was the period of the partition of Africa. But during that period, in Europe, there were the development of industries. So they were looking for raw materials to be processing in their industries. So number one cause was need for raw materials. Number two was the need for new markets for manufactured goods. We have said that they had companies, they had factories in Europe. Therefore, they wanted to open up markets to say, right, there are people there who will go there and sell them our products. But you have to know that you cannot sell to your enemies. So that's why they grabbed the land to say, all right, Malawi belongs to us. So they came here as friends, but deep down their minds, they had it to say, right, we have manufactured goods, therefore we want to sell to these people, to this land that we have grabbed as ours. So you have to take note of that. They were looking for new markets apart from raw materials. Number three was to spread Christianity. Others, they grabbed the land in order to spread Christianity in that land which they grabbed. Number four, improvement in medical knowledge. Improvement in medical knowledge. So they wanted again to improve the medical knowledge. That is the medicine itself. Number four, just for prestige. Prestige is to show that I have this, I have that, I have that. That is prestige. To show off that they are powerful, they can also own another land and other people. And also exploration of Africa. Others, they were exploring Africa. They wanted to explore Africa. They wanted to explore Africa in that way. Now, there were some regulations or rules for the partition of Africa, European countries, they agreed on certain things to say, when you grab land in Africa, you have to follow this, this, and this. So what were those regulations that they were to follow? But before this, I have a small video clip here. Can you follow it and see what happened in the partition of Africa and the countries, that how they were divided, and the European countries? So follow through this small video clip.
Hi and welcome to this edition of Back in History. I do hope you're doing fine. In this edition, we briefly discussed the partitioning of Africa by European forces as part of the colonialization of the African continent. Africa has always been a vast territory with huge mineral resources in almost every part of the continent. So it became a location of attraction and more of a beautiful bride for the European forces. Merchants began to move into the continent through the sea routes and settled mostly in the coastal areas where you have the sea, the vast oceans, and so on. So as at the 15th century, several European countries had their presence or settlement in most parts of Africa and had engaged actively in commerce with the local people. What then happened was that the interest of the European forces began to conflict in some areas. The idea then arose to call for a conference in Berlin, Germany, to discuss the need to partition Africa among the European forces so as to avoid a violent clash of interest among the forces. So the meeting was held in 1884 in Berlin, Germany, at the instance of the then German Chancellor Bismarck. The agenda for the meeting was to discuss and settle how European countries would claim territories in Africa to avoid conflict and the outbreak of war among the European countries. And all the major European states were invited to the conference. Germany, France, Great Britain, Netherlands, Portugal, Belgium, Spain were all invited. Denmark, Italy, Turkey, and Russia were also invited to take part in the discussion for partitioning of Africa. The United States of America was also invited, owing to its then interest in Libya. But the US was not interested in having a permanent colonial interest in the continent of Africa and therefore did not attend the Berlin Conference. It is important to note that no African was invited to the conference. Neither were the African people aware of what was being discussed against their territory by the European forces. In other words, the native African people had no say whatsoever in the partitioning of their land to European forces. It has been reported that the partitioning was done by the display of the map of Africa on the wall in a room occupied by the competing European interest. So it was more of a point and take kind of situation where each representative simply pointed at the location he considered dear to his country, and the location was given to such representative subject to some deliberations. In the end, the countries in Africa were partitioned as follows: Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, French Equatorial Africa, and Madagascar were given to France. And that is why most of these countries are French-speaking countries till today. Libya, Eritrea, and Somaliland were given to Italy. Tanganyika and the Congo were given to Belgium. Angola, Zambezi, and a part of Madagascar were given to Portugal. The Gold Coast, now Ghana, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, Nigeria, Sudan, Egypt, British Somaliland, Uganda, British East Africa, Rhodesia, and South Africa were taken by Great Britain. Some portions of Africa were also taken by Spain, being a major colonial imperialist at the time in Africa. The countries so mentioned remained under the colonial dominance of the European forces for several years to come, and the vast mineral resources of the continent were exploited non-stop and exported through the sea to factories in Europe. Now, at the conference, the modality for ownership of the territories was set, and one of the modalities agreed upon was that, quote, each European country that claimed possession over a part of Africa must bring civilization in the form of Christianity and trade to such territory. End of quote. African traditional rulers were made to sign documents to signify their acceptance of the occupation of their territories by the European forces. Any traditional ruler who refused to sign the agreement was either dethroned and made to become a commoner at home or banished to slave plantations abroad. Some native African entities resisted the occupation of their lands, but they were soon overpowered by the imperialist forces, who were obviously more sophisticated in weaponry and more prepared. Now, it is important to note that most of the national boundaries we have in Africa today are boundaries that were created in the course of the partitioning of Africa. Some of the boundaries were created arbitrarily, with little or no regard for similarity in the people's way of life, geography, and culture. Most of the conflicts for control of resources in Africa have been traced to the imbalances that were created by the partitioning of 1984. These countries later gained independence from the imperialist forces, beginning from Ghana in 1957. So Ghana was the first country in Africa to gain independence from its colonial masters in 1957. This was followed by Nigeria in 1960 and followed by other countries as the years went by. Many thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel for regular notifications.
Now, let us look at the regulations. What were the regulations? A country had to occupy and develop the claimed land. If not developed, the claimed land could be lost to other countries. So they agreed that, all right, whenever you grab land, you have to make sure you occupy that land and you start to develop that land. If you don't develop, we are going to grab that land again because it is underdeveloped. Regulation number 2, quarreling countries over the areas had to settle disputes by agreeing on the matter themselves. So when two countries, they are scrambling for a single territory, they had to settle by themselves. They had to agree what they are to do, what they have to do by themselves, without involving other countries. So the two countries in conflict, they have to agree one thing, to say, all right, you want this land, I also want this land. What do we do? So they have to settle by their own. So that is regulation number 2. Regulation number 1, we have said that they agreed that they had to develop every occupied area. And number 2, they had to agree if they are quarrels over the same territory. Number 3, international trading centers were set free for all traders from different countries. Here, what we mean is that there were other territories that were regarded as international trade centers. Those centers, they were to be open to all countries for trade. Not that because maybe France has occupied this territory, no other country was allowed to trade in that territory. No. So they agreed that international trade centers, they should remain open to all countries. And finally, countries had to end slavery and slave trade in their colonies. So during the partition of Africa, they did not want to say, all right, don't occupy a land so that you should get the people and use them as slaves. No. So one agreement was that they needed to stop slave trade completely in their occupied or colonized areas. So all those colonized or occupied areas, they had to free slave trade. No slave trade, to end it completely. So let's look at the countries that partitioned Africa. What were these countries that partitioned or scrambled for Africa? Number one is Germany. So Germany took some areas in Africa. What were these lands? Germany got Southwest Africa, which is today called Namibia. Then Togoland, which is called Togo, Cameroon, and German East Africa, which is Tanzania. So our neighbor Tanzania, Namibia, Togo, and Cameroon were all colonized or taken by Germany. What about France? France got a lot of territories. What were these? Morocco, Algeria, Mauritius, French West Africa, which is Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Niger. Take note of this, Niger. This is not Nigeria. This is Niger. Can you pronounce that? Niger. Niger. Upper Volta, which is Burkina Faso. There was also Guinea, Ivory Coast, Benin, Chad, Gabon, Tunisia, Madagascar, French Somaliland, and Djibouti. All these territories were taken by France. So France had more than Germany, you can see there. Another country is Portugal. So Portugal got Angola, Mozambique, Portuguese Guinea, which is today called Guinea-Bissau. So these were the territories for Portugal. What about Italy? Italy got Somaliland and Libya. So Italy got those two areas, Somaliland and Libya. What about Belgium? Belgium also got another Belgium Congo, which is today called DRC. It went to Belgium. So you can see there. What about Britain? Britain got these territories. Just as France, Britain also had a lot of territories. What were these? Southern Rhodesia, which is today called Zimbabwe. Northern Rhodesia, which is today called Zambia. Nyasaland, which is Malawi. And South Africa, Bechuanaland, which is Botswana. Swaziland, Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria. So remember, here is Nigeria. That territory that was occupied by France, we said it's what? Niger. Niger. So there should be a difference between Niger and Nigeria. They are all in West Africa there. So Nigeria went to Britain, Sierra Leone, Basutoland, which is Lesotho, British Somaliland, Gold Coast, which is now Ghana. So all these territories, they went to Britain. So you can see there, Britain also got a lot of territories. What about Spain? Spain also got Rio de Oro, which is Western Sahara, a country called Western Sahara. So these were the main countries that took part in the scramble for Africa. However, there are some territories which were not occupied. Ethiopia and Liberia, they were independent, therefore no country colonized them. So Ethiopia and Liberia were not colonized. All countries, all territories in Africa were taken except Ethiopia and Liberia. Ethiopia was independent. Ethiopia, it was taken, of course, by Italy, but immediately Ethiopia defeated Italy, therefore it got itself independent. And Liberia, it was under the influence of United States, therefore it was not colonized by any other country. So that's why we are saying that they were independent, therefore they were not colonized. Now, let us look at the effects. Let us come to the end by looking at the effects of partition of Africa. What were the effects of partition of Africa? We have seen how countries were divided. What were the effects? Number one, forced laborers was imposed in certain areas where Africans were treated like slaves. So there was forced labor. When those colonial masters came, now they forced people to work now for free. So they were working not as slaves, but just like slaves, but it was just forced labor. Sometimes they give very little pay. In some territories, Africans lost fertile land to European plantations. So those countries, they came because they agreed that they have to develop. So they were coming here to open their farms. So those farms were for them, the Europeans. So they used the land that previously belonged to Africans. So Africans, they lost the land to the Europeans during this period. And also, colonization sped up the spread of Christianity. So we see, on the other hand, Christianity spread very quickly. That's why you see today, maybe in Africa, Christianity has spread very quickly simply because of that colonization. So Christianity was brought by these Europeans who came to settle and develop their territories, open up farms and mines and many other things. And on the other hand, they were spreading Christianity. They started to spread Christianity in all their territories. So we are saying that the coming of partition, during this partition of Africa, then Christianity spread, or it was spread up with speed. So quickly there was the spread of Christianity. So to this far, we have come to the end of this unit, where we are looking at the partition of Africa. In this unit, we have looked at partition of Africa and the scramble of Africa, to say they are the same. To say between the 18th and 19th, or the 19th and 20th century, what happened was that European countries, they started to scramble for Africa to gain land. We have looked at the reasons why. We said that they were looking for raw materials, they were looking for markets and land to settle, and for prestige and all other reasons. We have looked at that. And we have looked at the countries that were involved and the territories that were partitioned. We have also looked at, there were some 2 territories or countries that were not occupied. This is Liberia and Ethiopia. So we have looked at a number of issues. So you know now, to this far, that we have the boundaries. But these boundaries were not put by us, but by the Europeans during the partition of Africa. So you have good knowledge of the same. Now, let me leave you with this small exercise that you are going to do on your free time. So pause a little bit, pause this video and copy the questions. So you pause and copy the questions. Understand the questions, understand these questions properly so that you do it better. Now, having done that, it means we have come to the end of this unit. But next time, we are going to look at unit number 5, which is gender equality in society. Gender equality in society. Remember, we are looking at the subject social studies. Social studies focuses on issues that affect our society. Now, gender equality is another issue that affects the society. So next time, be there as we look at this wonderful unit. So until next time, thank you so much.